He noticed that the servant at home was staring at the pastries on the table with longing eyes. So, he generously picked up a pastry and handed it to the servant. Shmuel immediately began devouring it hungrily, suddenly feeling this little master wasn't so bad after all. But just then, an officer abruptly stormed in.
Have you been stealing food?
Answer me!
No, sir. He gave it to me.
Little man?
No, I just walked in and he was helping himself.
Shmuel's eyes widened in disbelief. This young master, who had seemed so kind a moment ago, had actually turned around and betrayed him. Bruno regretted it the moment he went upstairs. He remembered that just yesterday, another servant at home accidentally knocked over an officer's wine glass, and was dragged outside and had his leg broken on the spot. At the table, his father had remained indifferent, as if such incidents were commonplace. The lie he had just told might cost the young servant his life. Filled with remorse, Bruno quickly ran back downstairs, hoping to explain what had happened, but Shmuel had already disappeared without a trace. Bruno ran guiltily to the place where the two usually played, but he still couldn't find him. He desperately wanted to apologize and make it up to Shmuel, but what he didn't yet realize was just how high a price he'd soon have to pay for this guilt. The first meeting between the two happened half a month earlier. On Bruno's first day here, after moving with his father, they moved from Berlin to this remote place because his father had been promoted to commandant. In the old city, Bruno had many good friends, but his entire family moved to this deserted place for his father's job. He was very unhappy. There were soldiers everywhere, and no one his age to play with. Bored beyond belief, he leaned against the window. That was when he discovered an interesting place. Through the window, he saw a farm in the distance where many children played, but oddly, they all wore striped pajamas. The innocent Bruno didn't understand what those pajamas meant, so he ran to ask his father.
Why do the farmers wear pajamas?
The thing is, Bruno, those people.
His father was about to explain, but Bruno's mother stopped him. She didn't want such a young child knowing these things yet. Bruno wanted to play with those children, but his parents forbade him. They even sealed the windows and wouldn't let Bruno leave the yard. But the more they forbade him, the more curious Bruno became about that farm. Today was the first time he'd seen people in striped pajamas up close. He was too bored, and decided to build a swing on a tree. So he approached one of his father's subordinate officers. The officer immediately yelled at an elderly servant nearby. Bruno was startled, confused as to why this officer was treating the old servant so harshly. The old servant timidly complied. Not daring to show any slowness, he quickly found a tire and built Bruno's swing. Just then, Bruno noticed a smoking chimney in the distance. He curiously stood up to get a better look, and accidentally fell from the swing. The old servant rushed over, quickly bringing Bruno back inside to tend to his injury. His hands were very skillful. During their conversation, Bruno learned that the old man had once been a doctor.
Practiced as a doctor. Or I came here.
At this moment, Bruno's mother suddenly returned. The old servant grew nervous, not knowing what to do, but surprisingly, Bruno's mother didn't blame him.
Thank you.
Bruno still couldn't understand why the old servant had been so nervous. Father hired a teacher specifically for him and his sister, teaching them German history, but Bruno couldn't concentrate at all. He was only interested in adventures. His mind was always fixed on that farm. One day, when no one was watching, he snuck into the backyard and jumped out through a window. He ran through the woods and finally reached the farm he had longed to visit. There, he met Shmuel for the first time. As soon as they met, Shmuel asked him for food. From his appearance, it was clear he'd been hungry for a long time. Bruno became excited when he learned Shmuel was his own age. This was the first friend he'd made here. Seeing Shmuel's clothes, Bruno felt a sudden sense of unfairness.
It's not fair, me being stuck over here on my own, while you're over there, playing with friends all day.
He thought the numbers on Shmuel's clothes were part of some game. Just then, a whistle blew, and Shmuel quickly stood up. His small body trembled as he pushed a heavy cart away. The next day, Bruno brought chocolate specifically to share with Shmuel, but Shmuel didn't appear. Out of boredom, Bruno threw a piece of metal, accidentally discovering the barbed wire fence was electrified. He didn't dwell on it. The next day, taking advantage of his parents' absence, he went back to the fence again. This time, he asked Shmuel some questions.
Why do you people wear pajamas all day? They're not pajamas. Well, those.
We have to. They took all of the clothes away.
Who did?
The soldiers.
The soldiers? Why?
Why would you?
It was the first time Bruno had heard this term. He didn't understand what it meant until his father arranged a teacher to educate him and his sister.
The Jew slandered us and incited our enemies. The Jew corrupted us through bad books. He mocked our literature and our music. Everywhere his influence was destructive, the eventual result of which was our nation's collapse. And then...
Yes, Bruno?
Upon hearing this, Bruno began to question things. He didn't quite agree with his teacher's explanations. He believed good and bad people in this world shouldn't be classified by race. He believed Shmuel was a good person, so instead of attending his teacher's classes, Bruno secretly snuck into the kitchen, bringing many snacks to Shmuel. Shmuel ate ravenously. Bruno tossed a ball toward Shmuel, hoping to play with him, but Shmuel warned him not to throw the ball over, saying it was dangerous. Although Bruno didn't understand why, he was still curious about how their number game worked. Then, the whistle sounded again. Shmuel hurriedly left. When Bruno returned, his mother caught him. He made an excuse to get by. Just then, his mother smelled a terrible odor. The officer beside her suddenly explained.
They smell even worse when they burn, don't they?
His mother froze. She pondered a moment, gazing at the distant chimney, and suddenly understood what the officer meant. She immediately confronted her husband. She couldn't believe her husband was capable of such cruelty. They argued bitterly, but she was powerless to change anything. On this very day, the elderly servant at home accidentally broke a wine glass while pouring wine. Mother begged father for mercy, but father remained indifferent, as if such events were routine. Bruno couldn't understand why his father didn't intervene. By now, his sister had already been indoctrinated. Bruno suddenly realized just how cold-hearted his father was. Everyone around Bruno was trying to instill these same beliefs in him. He gradually became suspicious and began pondering their words. One day, he saw Shmuel washing glasses in the dining room. At first, Bruno was delighted, but then remembered what others had taught him. Shmuel didn't say a word, just stared at the pastries on the table.
Do you want some?
Seeing Shmuel's pure look, Bruno smiled happily anyway. He still thought his father was too cold-hearted. But at that moment, the officer suddenly rushed in. His shouting terrified Bruno. Bruno thought of all the warnings he'd heard. Out of fear, he instinctively lied.
Have you been stealing food?
Answer me!
No, sir. He gave it to me.
Little man?
No, I just walked in and he was helping himself.
But immediately after, he regretted his words deeply. When he returned to find Shmuel, the boy was already gone. Bruno went back to their meeting spot, but Shmuel was nowhere to be found. Days passed without any sign of Shmuel. Bruno suspected something bad had happened. Yet today, Bruno saw his father showing visitors a movie. The farm in the film looked so wonderful. Bruno believed he'd misunderstood his father, and rushed forward to hug him, but only his mother, standing in the shadows, knew the truth that everything was a lie. But the naive Bruno believed it. He started visiting the farm every day again, until many days later, when he finally saw Shmuel again. Shmuel had clearly suffered greatly. Shmuel remained silent. Bruno tried to explain. Afraid they'd no longer be friends, he apologized sincerely to Shmuel. Shmuel paused quietly, and ultimately forgave him. Just like that, their friendship was restored. Ever since discovering the horrifying truth about this camp, his mother's heart had been close to collapse. After her relentless insistence, Bruno's father finally agreed to let her take the children away from this place. But by now, Bruno had grown fond of living here, especially after watching the films his father showed him, and he'd come to play with Shmuel every day. They spent their time playing chess together. However, his father had already made the decision they were leaving tomorrow. Facing the sudden news, Bruno had no choice but to say a reluctant goodbye to Shmuel. But at that moment, he heard some troubling news.
We can't find Papa.
Still feeling deep guilt about what he'd done before, Bruno wanted to make it up to Shmuel somehow before he left. He believed this would make up for the harm he had previously caused his friend. Then Bruno noticed that the soil by the fence was loose and could be dug through. Sparking a clever idea, he could dig a tunnel under the fence, sneak into the camp, and help Shmuel search for his father. The two boys discussed it briefly and decided it was a workable plan. They made a promise. Shmuel would find a striped outfit for Bruno, and Bruno would bring some food. That night, neither boy slept well, each eagerly anticipating their secret mission. The next day, Bruno made an enormous sandwich and hid it inside his clothes. He told his mother he wanted one last ride on the swing. She didn't suspect anything and agreed. Secretly grabbing a shovel, Bruno rushed to the fence to meet Shmuel. Shmuel brought the striped pajamas, and Bruno quickly changed out of his own clothes into the uniform. Thunder rolled in the distance, as if warning Bruno not to enter, but Bruno paid no heed, immediately starting to dig the hole beneath the fence. At the same time, Bruno's mother was preparing to leave. When she realized Bruno wasn't at the swing, panic set in, and she began searching everywhere. By now, Bruno had already crawled through the freshly dug hole into the camp. The two boys exchanged excited smiles. They began their search for Shmuel's father inside the camp. But very soon, Bruno sensed something wasn't right. This place was nothing like the pleasant images he'd seen in the films.
Can I go to the cafe or something?
Cafe?
Realizing the danger, Bruno wanted to leave immediately. However, faced with Shmuel's questioning gaze, Bruno hesitated. After a brief moment of consideration, he decided he'd first help Shmuel find his father. They entered a building in the camp, but the moment they stepped inside, soldiers began rounding everyone up. They found themselves trapped in a dense, frightened crowd, barely able to move, forced to follow the mass of people. Meanwhile, Bruno's mother and sister desperately searched for him. Discovering Bruno's dropped sandwich in the open window, they suddenly realized the severity of the situation. They immediately informed Bruno's father, who hurriedly gathered soldiers and police dogs to track Bruno down. Eventually, they discovered the hole he dug in the clothes scattered beside the fence. By this time, Bruno had been herded along with the crowd into an underground chamber. Soldiers commanded everyone to remove their clothes. Others reassured them it was just a shower, and the innocent Bruno obediently followed along. He didn't notice the fear and panic on the faces around him. Everyone was forced into a sealed chamber, stripped of their clothes. People began to scream in terror as poisonous gas seeped into the chamber through pipes above their heads. When Bruno's father finally arrived, everything was already over. He never imagined, even in his darkest nightmares, that his own evil deeds would cost the life of his beloved son. Until his final breath, Bruno couldn't understand why simply going to play with a friend had led to such a tragic fate. As observers, we clearly know what happened here, but Bruno was just an 8-year-old child. From beginning to end, he thought the concentration camp was merely a farm. He believed the striped clothes were simply uniforms for a game. He noticed the foul smell from the chimneys, but he didn't know it was from burning human bodies. From his innocent perspective, his father was a noble and honorable soldier striving to improve people's lives. He believed the people in pajamas lived happily, diligently working on the farm, and could rest at cafes when tired. Yet, at the same time, he also had many unanswered questions. He couldn't understand why his mother's eyes were swollen from crying and why she refused to tolerate living here any longer. Why a doctor was peeling potatoes in their kitchen. Why accidentally knocking over a wine glass led to severe beatings. Why people who went for a shower never woke up again. Bruno carried these questions with him to another world. Perhaps, in that place, there would no longer be anyone wearing striped pajamas. And perhaps, once he learned the truth, he might make one final wish for this world, that there would be peace. I'm a movie enthusiast. Please subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time.